Hi guys, here is final part of our space story. If you like it, like and comment the video and don't forget to subscribe our channel. I'll interpret that as a positive sign. The commander redirected his gaze towards the tactical display, which illuminated the star chart. It pinpointed the location of the Varan homeworld, nestled deep within Council-controlled territories. This was a risky undertaking, but one potentially altering the war's course. The Varan, unrivaled in close-quarters combat, commanded a fleet of warships, prized for raw strength and durability. Securing their allegiance could thrust the Council into a two-front war, a scenario they might not endure. "Prepare the fleet," Logan commanded. "We're en route to Varan space." On the desolate, windswept plains of the Varan homeworld, an empire once glorious now lay in ruins. Fortresses, eroded by centuries of neglect, resembled the skeletal remains of a long-dead behemoth. The Varan people, previously hailed as the galaxy's fiercest warriors, now toiled under the Council's oppressive rule, reduced to laborers and enforcers. However, beneath the surface, the embers of rebellion still glowed. In the planet's deepest caverns, far beyond the Council's surveillance, the Varan secretly gathered, plotting retribution. Here, Logan and a selected team from the Sigma fleet arrived. The Varan warlord, a formidable figure, greeted them. His scarred countenance bore witness to countless battles, his armor adorned with the emblems of ancient clans. His every movement was charged with energy, and his eyes blazed with barely contained fury. This species, though broken, was not defeated. They still remembered the respect their name commanded. "Who defies the Council?" the warlord boomed, his voice like distant thunder. "You seek an alliance. Why should we trust you? Your kind has never stood beside us, never bled alongside us." Without wavering, Logan responded, "Because we share a common adversary. The Council keeps both our peoples in chains, treating us as inferiors. That ends now. We possess the might to fight back, to break free. But we need each other." The warlord's gaze narrowed. "And what do you offer? Glory? Wealth? These are meaningless to us. We desire only vengeance." "Then you'll have it," Logan asserted, his voice hardening. "We've already delivered a blow. They won't recover from this. With your warriors and our technology, we can do more than just fight. We can triumph. We'll dismantle the Council's empire piece by piece until only ashes remain." For a drawn-out moment, the warlord remained silent. The tension in the air crackled with palpable energy. Logan could feel the Varan warriors close by, hands resting on weapon hilts. This was a species that valued strength above all else, and Logan knew any perceived weakness would invite aggression. Eventually, the warlord's expression shifted, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his scarred face. "You speak of conflict and bloodshed, things we understand. We will join your cause, but know this: should you betray us, our wrath will be turned upon you." Logan bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Together, we'll bring the Council to its knees." With the alliance cemented, the Sigma fleet and Varan warbands prepared for the next phase of the campaign. Yet, unbeknownst to them, on the unseen horizon, Zan's trap was already being prepared, crafted to lure the humans into a confrontation destined for their destruction. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Logan reviewed the star chart, his mind racing with possibilities. The Varan were fierce, but also unpredictable. Maintaining this alliance would require careful diplomacy. For now, their focus was the next target, a pivotal Council shipyard located deep within enemy territory, where Zan was believed to be consolidating his forces. "We've intercepted Council transmissions suggesting unusual activity near the Corax Nebula," reported Commander Hawkins. "It could be a staging area for their next move," Logan mused, his instincts flaring. "Or it could be a trap," Hawkins grimly nodded. Logan's gaze hardened. "We'll spring their trap, but on our terms. Prepare the fleet. We're moving out." In the shadowy depths of the Corax Nebula, where even the stars seemed to shimmer and fade, the Sigma fleet emerged from hyperspace. The nebula's swirling gases cast an eerie glow upon the battlefield. Human and Varan ships formed a battle-ready formation, but something felt off, too tranquil, too silent. Logan narrowed his eyes, scanning the readouts. Where's the enemy fleet? They should be here by now. Before he could voice his concerns, alarms blared across the bridge. Hawkins's face turned pale as she examined her console. Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures, multiple contacts emerging from subspace. In an instant, the trap was sprung. Numerous Council warships materialized around the Sigma fleet, their weapons already firing. But this was only the beginning. The space surrounding them warped, and colossal energy barriers flared into existence, effectively sealing off any avenues of escape. The Sigma fleet was ensnared. "Evasive maneuvers," Logan ordered. "Get us clear of those barriers!" The Indomitable's engines roared as the ship swerved. However, the Council's formation was designed to channel the humans into a kill zone. Zan's voice crackled over the comms, filled with malicious glee. "Did you truly believe you could outmaneuver us, human? You may have won the first round, but now you'll witness the Council's true might. Your fleet is finished." Logan's mind raced as he evaluated their options. They were outnumbered and surrounded, but there was still a path out if they could penetrate the Council's formation's weakest point. "Concentrate all fire on Sector Gamma 12, Logan commanded. "We break through their lines and regroup on the nebula's far side. Varan ships, cover our flanks." The Varan warships surged forward, their heavy cannons carving a path through the Council's defenses. Space exploded with chaos as energy beams, plasma blasts, and missiles created a deadly web. The Sigma fleet's superior technology allowed them to hold their own, but the Council's sheer numbers were overwhelming. As the Indomitable barreled towards the enemy formation's weakest spot, Logan knew their time was running out. The energy barriers were closing in, and if they failed to escape soon, they would be cut off and destroyed. "Push through!" Logan shouted, his voice rising above the battle's clamor. "All ships, full power to weapons and engines! We do not stop until we're clear!" In a final, desperate surge, the Sigma fleet broke through the Council's ranks, their guns blazing. The Indomitable led the charge, ramming through enemy ships with sheer force. Explosions ripped through the void as Council warships crumbled under the assault. In a flash of light, the Sigma fleet burst free from the trap. But victory came at a price. As the fleet regrouped on the far side of the nebula, Logan assessed the damage. Several ships were lost, and others severely damaged. The Varan warlord reported similar losses, his tone somber. "We bought ourselves some time," Logan said wearily, "but they will return, and next time they'll be even better prepared." Commander Hawkins looked at him, her expression a mix of determination and concern. "What's our next move, Captain?" Logan stared at the nebula's swirling gases, his mind already working on the next steps. They had survived the trap, but the war was far from over. The Council's true weapon, Project Apis, was still out there. Until it was neutralized, victory would remain elusive. "We keep moving," Logan finally declared. "We hit them where it hurts. Keep them off balance and we find that weapon. Because if we don't, everything we've fought for could be lost in an instant." The fleet powered up once more, engines roaring to life as they prepared to re-enter the fray. The war had entered a new phase, one that would test the limits of human resolve. But Logan knew that as long as they kept fighting, there was still hope. And with that hope came the chance for genuine freedom. The faint gleam of distant stars flickered across the hull of the Sigma fleet as they drifted in formation on the edge of known space. This was a brief lull in the storm, a moment of calm before they plunged back into the heart of conflict. Captain Logan Carter stood in the Indomitable's command center, his gaze fixed on the holographic star map dominating the room. The tension was palpable. Every officer knew that their next undertaking could decide the war's outcome. "Are we certain this is the location?" Logan asked, his voice low and measured, addressing Commander Hawkins. Hawkins nodded, her fingers tapping on her console as she brought up additional data. "All gathered intelligence points to this location, Captain. A concealed base deep within the Valorian expanse, on the fringes of Council space. Our scouts detected faint energy readings consistent with Project Apis." It's heavily shielded, but we are confident this is the place. Logan's eyes narrowed, studying the holographic projection. The Valorian expanse was a treacherous region, a vast nebula filled with volatile gases and gravitational anomalies that made navigation a nightmare. It was the perfect hiding place for a weapon as dangerous as Apis, a place where only the desperate or the exceptionally determined would dare to venture. "Council forces?" Logan asked. "Minimal activity detected in the immediate area," Hawkins replied, "but that doesn't mean they aren't waiting for us. If Zan was in charge, he would have a fleet prepared, concealed in ambush, primed to strike the instant we commence our move." Logan folded his arms, his features grave. "Precisely what I'd do too," he admitted. "But hesitation is a luxury we can't afford. Delaying for too long might allow them to deploy Apis, and we'd face annihilation on an unprecedented scale." He turned to the rest of his officers, observing their tense countenances. They'd weathered the hellscape together, from the opening assault on the Council's capital to the devastating ambush in the Corax Nebula. They knew the stakes, and despite their exhaustion and the heavy losses they'd suffered, they stood ready. "We're going in," Logan declared, his voice firm. "This is the heart of the Council's strength, their final gambit. If we eliminate Apis, we cripple them, getting closer to ending this war on our terms." There was no need for a motivational speech. The crew had heard it all, bled for it, and fought for every inch of ground they'd gained. Now their resolve was unshakable, tempered by the crucible of combat. "Prepare the fleet," Logan commanded, "and send a message to the Varan. I want them to position as our rear guard, ready to intercept any Council reinforcements." Deep within the Varan War Council's subterranean chambers, the atmosphere was equally tense. The walls of the chamber were carved from dark stone, illuminated by the flickering glow of ancient braziers. The air was heavy with the scent of burning incense and the metallic reminiscence of old blood, reminders of countless battles waged in the name of honor and vengeance. Varan warlord Garros stood at the head of a long table, flanked by his most trusted advisors. His scarred face was set in a grim frown as he reviewed the human transmission. Despite their current alliance, Garros remained wary of the humans, their technology, and their motives. However, he couldn't deny the brilliance they had exhibited during their campaign against the Council. Most importantly, the humans had presented the Varan with something they had long craved, a chance to strike back. "The humans move swiftly," Garros rumbled, his voice echoing throughout the stone chamber. "They intend to confront the Council's greatest weapon directly. A bold tactic, but fraught with peril." One of his advisors, a weathered veteran with a missing eye, stepped forward. "The humans have proven themselves cunning and resourceful. They fight with the passion of those long oppressed. But can we trust them, Warlord? What if they betray us once victory is within reach?" Garros narrowed his eyes. "Trust is a luxury we cannot afford in war. Yet we share a common goal with the humans. Their enemy is our enemy. We will fight alongside them, but we must remain vigilant. Should they falter, we will not hesitate to claim what is ours by force." He raised a massive hand, clenching it into a fist. "Prepare the warriors. We march to war once more, and this time we reclaim our honor." As the Sigma fleet entered the Valorian expanse, anticipation pervaded aboard the Indomitable. The swirling gases of the nebula cast uncanny shadows across the vessels as they advanced deeper into the dense cloud. Their sensors struggled to penetrate the interference. This was a place where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred, where ghostly figures seemed to dance at the edge of perception. Logan stood at the forward viewport, his mind fixed on the task at hand. The mission was clear: find and destroy Apis before the Council could utilize it. However, he understood that Zan would not make this simple. The Counselor had established himself as a cunning and merciless foe, and Logan had no doubt that a trap was lying in wait. "Status report," Logan called out. Hawkins did not look up from her console when she responded. "We're still picking up faint energy signatures, Captain, but it's difficult to get a lock. The nebula is interfering with our sensors. We're flying blind out here." "Any sign of enemy ships?" Logan inquired. "Not yet, But that doesn't mean they aren't present, Captain, Hawkins replied. They could be utilizing the nebula to mask their approach, just like us. Logan nodded. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with both sides hunting each other through the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Yet they could not afford to delay for too long. The longer they tarried, the greater the likelihood that Apis would be activated. "Keep scanning," Logan ordered. "We must find that base." Time passed as the fleet ventured deeper into the nebula, tension escalating with each passing minute. Every shadow, every glimmer of light presented a potential threat. Then, just as Logan was beginning to contemplate altering their course, Hawkins' console lit up with a burst of data. "Captain, I have something," she exclaimed. "It's faint, but there's definitely a structure ahead. Energy readings are off the charts. It corresponds with everything we know about Apis." Logan's heart raced. "All ships, prepare for combat. We move in fast, hit them hard." The fleet surged forward, weapons primed and ready. The nebula parted, revealing a colossal space station suspended in the void, resembling a spider at the center of its web. It was a fortress, bristling with heavy weaponry and shielded by energy barriers that crackled with barely contained power. The scale of the station was incredible, easily sufficient to house the kind of weapon capable of ending entire worlds. However, before the Sigma fleet could engage, alarms blared across the Indomitable's bridge. "Enemy contacts!" Hawkins shouted. "Dozens of them coming in from all directions!" The trap had sprung. Council warships materialized from the nebula, their guns blazing. It was an ambush, exactly as Logan had predicted. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far to retreat. "Varan ships, form up and engage!" Logan ordered. "Sigma fleet, target the station shield generators. We need to take those barriers down." The battle erupted into chaos. The void filled with the glow of energy beams, the flash of exploding ships, and the roar of engines as the fleets clashed. The Council's forces fought with desperate ferocity, determined to safeguard their ultimate weapon at any cost. Nonetheless, the Sigma fleet was relentless, their advanced technology offering them the advantage in speed and firepower. The Varan warriors proved their worth as they ripped into the Council's ships with brutal abandon, their war cries echoing across the comms. They fought like berserkers, savoring the chance to avenge themselves against their ancient enemies. But for all their ferocity, the Council's numbers were overwhelming. The defenders had been anticipating this moment, and they weren't going to let the humans or their allies through without a fight. As the battle raged, Logan's attention remained focused on the station. They had to disable the shields before they could destroy Apis, yet the shield generators were heavily fortified, protected by layers of armor and automated defenses. Every attempt to breach the defenses was met with a torrent of fire, forcing the Sigma fleet to divert their attacks. "We're running out of time," Logan muttered. "Hawkins, how long before those generators are down?" Hawkins's face was strained with concentration. "We've managed to disable 2 of them, Captain, but the third is still active. We need to get closer, but the Council ships are blocking our approach." Logan clenched his fists. They were so close, yet the enemy was making them pay dearly for every inch. But then an idea struck him. Risky, but it might work. "Divert power from non-essential systems to forward shields and engines," Logan ordered. "We're going in full speed. If we can break through their lines, we might be able to take out that last generator before they can react." The Indomitable surged forward, leading the charge as it plowed through the enemy formation. Council ships scrambled to block their path, yet the Sigma fleet pressed on, absorbing heavy fire as they closed the distance. The ship shook under the impacts, alarms blaring as shields flared and flickered. "Almost there!" Hawkins shouted, her voice strained. "The station looms ahead, the last generator in sight!" With a final burst of speed, the Indomitable broke through the defenses and unleashed a barrage of firepower directly at the generator. The shield flared, crackled, and then collapsed in a blinding flash. "Shields are down!" Hawkins cried out. Logan didn't hesitate. "All ships, target Apis and fire! We end this now." The combined firepower of the Sigma fleet and the Varan ships focused on the heart of the station. Energy beams slashed out, cutting through the station's hull with devastating precision. Explosions rippled across its surface as internal systems overloaded, sending debris and flames spiraling into space. However, as the station crumbled, something shifted. The energy readings spiked to dangerous levels, and alarms blared across the Indomitable's bridge. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive buildup of energy, unlike anything we've seen before." Hawkins' voice was filled with alarm. "It's Apis! They're activating it!" Logan's blood ran cold. "All ships, full retreat! Get clear of the station now!" But it was too late. The station's core detonated in a cataclysmic explosion, releasing a shockwave of energy that ripped through space, tearing apart everything in its path. Ships were caught in the blast, reduced to molten slag instantly. The Indomitable was thrown violently as the shockwave slammed into it, systems flickering and sparking as the ship struggled to hold together. For a moment, it seemed as though they were all doomed. But then, the shockwave dissipated, leaving only the wreckage of the station and the smoldering remnants of what had once been a fleet. Logan pulled himself upright, his vision blurry as he surveyed the damage. They had survived, but barely. The Council's forces were shattered, and Apis was no more, yet the cost had been high. Too high. "We did it, Captain," Hawkins said, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Apis is destroyed." However, Logan's expression was grim. "We won this battle, but the war is far from over. The Council will return, and they will be even more desperate. And now, we must pick up the pieces and keep fighting." He gazed out at the stars. His resolve, now a thing of tempered steel, the road ahead, a tapestry woven from shadows and threats. Yet, retreat was unthinkable. Their path had carried them too far. With Apis extinguished, the scales had tipped, altering the cosmic equation. Still, battles remained to be fought and victories to be claimed. "Set a course for the rendezvous point," Logan ordered, his voice firm. "We regroup, rebuild, and then we strike again." As the Sigma fleet, a collection of hope and defiance, prepared to once again breach the veil and vanish into the vastness of space, Logan knew the true fight, the war for humanity's very existence, was only just beginning. But with allies like the Varon, with the unyielding determination of his crew, he stood ready, prepared to confront any challenge the galaxy might hurl their way. Stars morphed into streaks of light, the Sigma fleet dissolving into the void, leaving behind only the remnants of the Council's final desperate gambit. The wreckage of Project Apis, a monument to vanquished dreams, drifted in the darkness, scattered like ashes across the celestial canvas. For a breath, a moment of quiet reigned, an uneasy stillness settling over the galaxy, born in the aftermath of the Sigma fleet's victory. But Logan Carter knew silence was a liar, a deceptive calm preceding a storm. He understood it as a prelude, a brief respite before the Council struck back with the full weight of their power. And strike back they would. Far beyond the ruin of the Valorian expanse, deep within the fortified sanctuary of the Council's inner worlds, Counselor Zan seethed, a fury unleashed. His chamber, cloaked in the shadows, cast harsh lines across his reptilian features as he brooded, contemplating the empty displays before him. The loss of Apis was a grievous blow, one that had shaken the Council to its core. Yet for Zan, it was also a humiliation, one that demanded retribution. His claws tapped against the armrest of his command chair, a rhythmic and precisely calculated beat, each tap echoing like the slow, relentless ticking of a clock. "We underestimated them," Zan hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "These humans have proven more resilient than any species we've faced before. But that only meant they needed to intensify their brutality, to become more merciless in their response. The humans, he thought, they have tasted victory, and soon that taste would turn sour." Surrounding him, his most trusted advisors, battle-hardened military commanders from a dozen diverse species, stood in silence, patiently awaiting his orders. They believe their Sigma fleet makes them invincible, but every weapon possesses a weakness. "We will find theirs, and exploit it to the fullest extent." One of his commanders, a massive armor-clad warrior, a permanent snarl etched upon his face, stepped forward. "Our spies have uncovered the humans' next objective," the warrior announced. They're planning to attack our supply lines, severing our access to crucial resources in the Elorian corridor. It's a bold move, but it renders them vulnerable. We could lure them into a trap, strike them where they least expect it. Zan's lips curled into a cold smile, a grimace of satisfaction. Indeed, we will bait them with false information, draw them into a carefully prepared kill zone, but we will not rely solely on brute force. We will also attack them from within. The holographic display shifted, showcasing a map of the Sigma fleet's last known position. This map was more than a collection of star systems and navigation routes. It contained detailed schematics of the human ships, highlighting their energy outputs, shield frequencies, and weapon systems. It was information gleaned from months of observation, captured through hidden sensors and infiltrators embedded deep within the human ranks. Our agents have identified key vulnerabilities in their shielding technology, Zan explained. It is advanced, yes, but not without flaws. We've developed countermeasures, energy disruptors, that can short-circuit their shields at close range. When their defenses fall, we will unleash a full-scale assault, and this time, there will be no escape. The commanders nodded, a grim satisfaction mirroring their expressions. They could already envision the carnage to come. But Zan wasn't finished. He gestured to another segment of the hologram, where a cluster of symbols marked the locations of dormant fleets. Warships, concealed for centuries, buried within the forgotten corners of Council space. These ships were relics of the Council's past wars, designed for a single brutal purpose: total annihilation. "We will awaken the Harrower fleets," Zan declared, his voice adopting an almost reverent tone. "These ships have not seen combat in generations, but they were built for this very moment. They are crude compared to the human vessels, but their firepower is unmatched. We will send them in waves, wave after wave, until the Sigma fleet is overwhelmed." One of the commanders hesitated. "But activating the Harrower fleets will require a significant allocation of resources," he pointed out. "It will leave our other territories exposed." "Let them be exposed," Zan snapped, his eyes blazing with anger. "None of it matters if we do not crush the humans here and now. This is a war for survival, and we will make whatever sacrifices are necessary to ensure our victory." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold, calculating. "Once the Sigma fleet is destroyed, we will send the remnants of our forces to Earth. We will raze their cities to the ground, exterminate their people, and erase their history from the annals of the galaxy. They will become nothing more than a cautionary tale, a warning to any species that might dare challenge the Council in the future." Zan's smile widened, a cruel glint in his eyes. The plan was flawless, a masterstroke of strategy and ruthlessness, and this time there would be no mistakes. The humans had forced his hand, but now it was time to show them the true meaning of fear. Meanwhile, in the aftermath of the Valorian Expanse battle, the Sigma fleet struggled, limping back towards a hidden rendezvous point on the edge of neutral space. The ships bore the scars of their recent victory, their hulls scorched and pitted by the relentless combat. Inside the Indomitable, engineers worked tirelessly to repair critical systems, while the medics tended to the wounded. The air hung thick with the tension of a fleet that knew it had narrowly escaped disaster. Logan Carter stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of his forces. The losses had been substantial. Several key ships had been lost, and their supply lines were stretched thin. But despite these setbacks, they had achieved their objective. Apis was destroyed, and the Council's ultimate weapon was no more. Yet, Logan knew better than to celebrate. This was merely a temporary reprieve, a fleeting victory in a war that was far from over. "Reports are coming in from all over," Commander Hawkins announced as she approached. "Council forces are regrouping, consolidating their fleets around key strongholds. They're digging in for a counter-offensive." Logan nodded, his expression grim. "They're not going to sit back and take this. We've bloodied their nose, but now they're going to come at us with everything they've got. We need to stay one step ahead." He studied the star map, contemplating their next move. They couldn't afford to go on the defensive. The only way to win was to continue pressing the attack, forcing the Council to react rather than plan. But they were running out of time and resources. "We need more ships," Logan muttered. "More resources, more allies." Hawkins frowned. "The Varen have been valuable, but they're growing restless. They're warriors, not soldiers. They don't take orders easily, and they're starting to question our tactics. If we push them too hard, we could lose them." Logan sighed. The Varen, a double-edged sword, formidable in battle but difficult to control. They craved direct confrontations, glory, and combat. But this war required strategy, precision, and patience. Keeping the alliance intact was becoming increasingly difficult, especially with every battle pushing them closer to their breaking point. "We have to manage it," Logan said finally. "Without the Varen, we don't stand a chance against what's coming." But even as he spoke, alarms blared across the bridge, and the star map flickered with red icons. "Enemy contacts!" Hawkins shouted. "Multiple warp signatures detected! They're coming out of hyperspace right on top of us!" Logan's heart pounded as he raced to the command center. The view screen filled with the image of a massive Council fleet. Council ships moved with grim determination, their weapons firing in coordinated salvos that hammered the human defenses. The void was illuminated with the glow of energy blasts and explosions as the fleets clashed, each side pouring everything they had into the fight. But the Council's tactics were different this time, relentless and unyielding. Wave after wave of Harrower ships surged forward, sacrificing themselves to break through the human lines. Logan watched in horror as entire squadrons were wiped out, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. "They're trying to wear us down!" Hawkins shouted over the din. "They're using their numbers to grind us into dust!" Logan's mind raced as he searched for a way to turn the tide. The Harrower fleets were crude, but they had abandoned finesse in favor of overwhelming force, and it was working. The Sigma fleet's advanced technology was being pushed to its limits, struggling to hold back the tide. But Logan wasn't ready to give up. He was aware that if the Council's assault could be checked, they might tilt the battle in their favor. However, it would demand a bold risk. "Ready the Nova cannons," Logan commanded. "Target the nucleus of their deployment. We're going to force a breach right through their ranks." Hawkins' eyes widened with surprise. "The Nova cannons? But if we fire them at this range—" "We have no choice," Logan snapped. "It's now or never." The Indomitable's engines surged to life as the ship bolted forward towards the core of the enemy fleet. The Nova cannons, the deadliest weapons in humanity's inventory, powered up with a low, ominous thrum, their barrels glowing with a fervent intensity. The Council's vessels adapted their layout, attempting to surround the Indomitable, but it was too late. With a booming roar, the Nova cannons released an energy stream that sliced through the vacuum like a blade of pure destruction. The Council's ships in its trajectory were vaporized immediately, their hulls disintegrating under the weight of the blast. But the assault wasn't halted there. The energy beam pierced through the center of the formation, weakening the Council's lines and sending shockwaves through their platoons. For the first time in the confrontation, the Harrower fleets faltered. "All ships, charge!" Logan shouted. The Sigma fleet seized the opportunity, their ships diving into the fray with renewed aggression. The Varen warriors joined the attack, their war cries echoing across the comms as they tore into the Council ships with heedless fervor. The void evolved into a maelstrom of fire and metal as the combat reached its zenith. Yet even as they battled, Logan was aware they were losing time. The Council wasn't withdrawing. They were entrenching themselves, dedicated to dragging the Sigma fleet down with them. The Harrower ships continued to stream into the battle, even as their numbers reduced. It was a last stand, a final gesture of defiance. And then, just when it appeared the battle would conclude in mutual annihilation, something unexpected occurred. The Council ships suddenly broke off their assault, pulling back in a synchronized retreat. Logan frowned in perplexity, unsure of what had just happened. "Why are they backing off?" Hawkins questioned aloud. "We didn't hit them hard enough to force a retreat." Logan's instincts screamed a warning. This wasn't a withdrawal, it was a ploy. They were configuring something even more dire. "Get us out of here," Logan demanded. "Full retreat, everybody now." But before they could escape, the viewport filled with a blinding light. A new fleet emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing everything they had faced previously. These were not the crude harrower ships. These were sleek, advanced warships bristling with cutting-edge weapons, and at the center of the formation was a mammoth flagship, a monstrosity that emanated raw power. Zan's voice crackled over the comms, imbued with cold triumph. "Did you truly believe we'd allow you to slip away so effortlessly? This ends now, human." The enemy fleet opened fire, and the void exploded into chaos once more. The Sigma fleet was entrapped between two merciless forces, their ships battered from all sides. Desperation set in as Logan understood they were caught with no egress, but he wasn't prepared to succumb. "All ships, center fire on the flagship. If we take it down, we might have a shot." The conflict raged with an intensity like nothing they'd confronted before. The Indomitable shuddered under the impacts, alarms blaring as vital systems began to fail. But Logan pressed forward, driving towards the enemy flagship with single-minded tenacity. As they closed the distance, Zan's likeness surfaced on the viewport, his visage twisted with malice. "You struggled well, Captain, but this is where your chronicle ceases. The Council won't be vanquished by vermin like you." Logan ground his teeth, declining to waver. "We're not finished yet, Zan. Not by a long shot." With one final push, the Indomitable let loose everything it possessed, discharging every weapon at its disposal. The enemy flagship shields flared, struggling to endure the onslaught. The void was filled with blinding light as the two ships collided in a desperate struggle for dominance, and then in a burst of fire and fury, the flagship shields collapsed. The Indomitable's armaments tore through its hull, detonating its core in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, launching ships off course and sending debris spiraling into the void. Zan's visage contorted in disbelief as the screen flickered and died, his final words lost in the static. The Council's layout shattered, their ships scattering in disarray as their command structure crumbled. The Sigma fleet intensified the attack, driving the enemy into retreat. Victory was within their grasp, but it had arrived at a horrific cost. As the last of the enemy ships escaped, Logan slumped back in his seat, exhausted but alive. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. They had survived another day, but the toll was escalating with each clash. "We did it," Hawkins said, her voice tinged with both relief and sorrow. Logan nodded, but his thoughts were already directed to the future. They had struck a decisive blow, but the Council wouldn't give up. They would regroup, rearm, and return stronger, and next time they might not be so fortunate. But for now, they had earned a moment of respite. The Sigma fleet had faced the Council's vengeance and emerged victorious. Yet Logan knew that the most grueling battles were still ahead. As the fleet limped away from the battlefield, Logan stared out at the stars, cognizant that the following chapter of this war would be even more brutal. But regardless of what transpired next, they would face it together, because in the end, they were fighting not merely for survival, but for the liberty of all those who had been oppressed by the Council's tyranny. The war would endure, but so would the fight for humanity's future. The Sigma fleet drifted in the ebony darkness of deep space, the scars of battle still fresh on their hulls. What should have felt like a celebratory victory instead loomed heavy in the air, the aftermath of the Council's ambush leaving more uncertainties than answers. In spite of the obliteration of the Council's flagship and the dispersal of their forces, Captain Logan Carter could not shake the nagging sense that they were being played, tricked into a snare that was still unfolding. On the bridge of the HSS Indomitable, the atmosphere was taut. Repairs were in progress, and the hum of machinery filled the air as engineers worked to mend the damage from the recent engagement. Logan stood at the tactical station, his eyes fixated on the star map, tracking the recent paths of the withdrawing Council ships. "We pushed them back, but they didn't break." Logan spoke softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "This retreat, it feels deliberate, controlled. They're up to something. Commander Sarah Hawkins advanced, her brow furrowed with concern. They've been on the defensive ever since Apis was obliterated. But you're right. This doesn't feel like a defeat. They sacrificed those Harrower fleets to weaken us, and it functioned. We're not at full strength anymore. Logan sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The weight of command had never felt heavier. And they know it. We're in a precarious situation, stretched thin, supplies running low, and our allies unpredictable at best. Hawkins's gaze drifted towards the comm station, where encrypted messages from the Varan fleet were being relayed. The Varan had fought fiercely, their bloodlust driving them to tear into the Council's forces with heedless abandon. But their loyalty was not assured. The rifts in the alliance were starting to reveal themselves, and Logan could feel the strain building like a storm on the horizon. Warlord Garros has requested another meeting, Hawkins reported, her tone wary. He's not happy with how the battle went. He claims we're holding back, that we're too concentrated on strategy and not enough on direct confrontation. Logan clenched his jaw. He understood where Garros was coming from. The Varon lived for the thrill of battle, for the honor of facing their enemies head-on. But this war required more than brute force. It demanded cunning, patience, and a willingness to adjust. Convincing the Varan to stay the course would necessitate more than just words. "Set up the meeting," Logan stated, his voice firm. "I'll talk to Garros personally." Deep within the Varan flagship, a dark, brooding vessel adorned with the emblems of ancient clans, Logan found himself facing Warlord Garros in a council chamber lit only by the flickering flames of ceremonial torches. The air was dense with the scent of burning incense, and the tension between the two leaders was palpable. Garros was a towering figure, his armor scarred and battle-worn, his eyes gleaming with a warrior's intensity. The other Varan commanders stood silently around the chamber, their expressions unreadable as they observed the exchange. "You fight like prey, human," Garros growled, his voice a deep rumble that echoed off the stone walls. "You speak of strategy and patience, while our enemies regroup and sharpen their blades. This is not how warriors fight. We should be hunting them, cornering them, and tearing them apart piece by piece." Logan met Garros's gaze steadily. "If we charge in blindly, we'll be walking straight into the traps they've set for us. The Council is desperate, and they're utilizing that desperation to lure us into overextending. We can't afford to fall into that trap. We need to be smart." "Smart," Garros sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think your cleverness will save you when the blood flows? War is not a game of tactics, human. It is a test of strength, of will. We are warriors, and warriors do not hide behind plans and calculations." Logan could feel the eyes of the other Varan commanders boring into him, waiting to see how he would respond. This was more than just a discussion. It was a test of his leadership, of whether he could command the respect of a species that valued strength above all else. "I understand your desire for battle, Warlord," Logan said, his tone calm. "However, I'm firm, and I have no intention of preventing you from having that, yet we are battling a distinct type of adversary. The Council is vulnerable, yes, but they are still dangerous. They desire for us to err, to act impulsively. If we concede that to them, we'll relinquish everything we strived for." Garros observed Logan intently for a protracted moment, his demeanor inscrutable. The ambient tension was stifling. Every Varan warrior stood poised to spring at the smallest hint of provocation. Gradually, the warlord's expression transformed, with a begrudging respect replacing the scorn. "You speak with conviction, human," Garros rumbled. "Perhaps there is more substance to you than I initially suspected. Very well, we'll sustain this alliance. But be warned, if I detect weakness, if I believe you're steering us towards dishonor, we won't hesitate to handle matters ourselves." Logan nodded in acknowledgement. "Understood, Warlord, but equally know this. If we succeed, your people will be freed from the Council's constraints. You'll attain the vengeance you've pursued for centuries." Garros offered a concise nod, and the meeting concluded. The alliance endured, for now, even as Logan managed the subtle politics of preserving his agreement with the Varan. Far across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was reorganizing under fresh leadership. The death of Councillor Zan had created a power vacuum, promptly filled by a new, astute leader, a figure veiled in secrecy and murmurs. This new leader, known only as the Arbiter, was a master of manipulation, preferring to wield power from the shadows rather than on the battlefield. Under the Arbiter's guidance, the Council altered its strategy, moving away from brute force towards subterfuge, deceit, and psychological warfare. Within a secluded war room, buried deep within the Council's core worlds, the Arbiter stood before a gathering of Council commanders. The chamber was dimmed, illuminated only by the fluctuating glow of holographic projections. The Arbiter's face was obscured by a hood, their voice calm and deliberate as they outlined their plan. "The humans have proven resilient," the Arbiter began, their voice carrying a nuanced threat. "They've resisted us fiercely, but ferocity alone won't win them this war. They rely on hope, on morale, on the belief that they can prevail against improbable odds. We will obliterate that hope." The holographic displays changed, showcasing critical human and allied installations across the galaxy. Supply depots, communication hubs, civilian colonies. The Arbiter's strategy was ruthless in its simplicity: to weaken the humans by attacking their vulnerable underbelly, sabotaging their supply lines, disrupting their communications, and sowing discord within their ranks. "But that's just the beginning," the Arbiter instructed. "We will target their colonies, their families, their loved ones. We will force them to decide between defending their people and continuing this futile conflict." The Council commanders affirmed their agreement with grim nods. The Arbiter's strategy was intended to destabilize the humans where they cannot protect what they hold dear. "And as they struggle to quell the fires we initiate, we will prepare for the final blow, an assault that will leave them no choice but to surrender or face total destruction." With the plan underway, the Arbiter's operatives began their work. Across the galaxy, Council agents infiltrated human installations, planting bombs, sabotaging systems, and disseminating misinformation. Panic and confusion spread as crucial supply lines were cut, leaving entire fleets stranded without resources in human-controlled space. Rumors of betrayal and fear took root, undermining trust and morale. In the depths of neutral territory, a hidden Council fleet began to amass, a fleet designed not for conquest, but for annihilation. The Arbiter had no desire to regain lost territory or negotiate peace. Their sole objective was to end the conflict by obliterating the Sigma fleet in a single decisive strike. Back on the Indomitable, the pressure was increasing. Reports of sabotage and attacks on human colonies flooded in, each one a grim reminder of the Council's new strategy. Logan could feel the crew's morale slipping, the constant threat of hidden adversaries taking its toll. In a rare moment of privacy, Logan stood alone in his quarters gazing at the stars. The weight of command bore down on him more than ever. He had confronted countless battles, but this conflict was undermining the very fabric of everything he was fighting for. Every victory seemed to come with a cost. Every step forward was met with another ambush, another loss. The door chimed, and Commander Hawkins entered, her expression somber. "Captain, we've just received word from one of our outer colonies. It was attacked, bombs planted by Council agents. Hundreds dead, thousands more displaced." "They hit a civilian target," Hawkins said softly. Logan's fists clenched at the news. "They're not just fighting us anymore. They're trying to break us, to make us question whether this war is worth it." Logan closed his eyes, striving to push back the rising tide of frustration and rage. He couldn't afford to break, not now, not when everything was hanging by a thread. The Arbiter's plan was working. The constant attacks were wearing them down, eroding the sense of unity and purpose that had kept them going. "We need a win, Sarah," Logan said finally. "Something substantial, something that shows our people that we can still turn this war around." Hawkins hesitated, then nodded. "Our intelligence has picked up something. Chatter about a major Council installation hidden in the Oroquas Rift. It's heavily defended, but if we can take it out, it would significantly impact their ability to coordinate these sabotage efforts." Logan's eyes sharpened with resolve. Then that's our next move. We strike hard, and we remind them that we are still in this fight. But even as they prepared for the assault, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into yet another trap. The Arbiter was out there, always one step ahead, always pulling the strings from the shadows. Logan knew that if they didn't find a way to disrupt this cycle of ambush and counterattack, it would only be a matter of time before the Council delivered the killing blow. The conflict was entering a new, more treacherous phase. The battles ahead would test not just their strength, but also their resolve, their unity, and their willingness to make sacrifices that could tear them apart from within. Yet, no matter how grim the outlook, Logan knew one thing. He would keep fighting until the very end. Because if they gave up now, everything they had fought for, all the lives lost, all the victories won, would have been for nothing. The Oraquas Rift was a region where anomalies twisted and churned like a living entity. It was a place few dared to venture, and even fewer returned from. Yet, somewhere in the heart of this forsaken region lay the Council's hidden installation, a critical hub for their new sabotage campaign. For days, the Sigma fleet had been preparing for the assault. Logan knew it was a risk, but it was a risk they had to take. If they could disrupt the Council's operations here, they could buy themselves valuable time and perhaps shift the tide of the war back in their favor. But deep down, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. But the alternative, doing nothing, was even worse. On the bridge of the HSS Indomitable, the atmosphere was tense as the fleet neared the rift. The viewscreen displayed a swirling mass of dark clouds, punctuated by flashes of purple lightning. It was like staring into the eye of a cosmic storm, a place where reality itself seemed to warp and stretch. "Approaching the rift," Commander Hawkins reported. "Sensors are picking up multiple gravitational anomalies. Navigating through this won't be easy." Logan leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Stay sharp. The Council knows we're coming. They'll be waiting for us." The Sigma fleet pushed into the rift with energy as they moved deeper into the heart of the anomaly, sensors straining to pierce through the interference. Every moment was a delicate dance, one misstep away from disaster. "Still no sign of enemy forces," Hawkins said, her voice tinged with unease. "It's too quiet." Logan's jaw tightened. He knew better than to trust the silence. "Maintain battle readiness. They're out there, hiding in the storm." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the fleet pressed on, the oppressive stillness gnawing at everyone's nerves. And then, just as they neared the installation, alarms blared across the bridge. "Contacts!" Hawkins shouted. "Multiple ships emerging from subspace, dead ahead!" The Council fleet appeared out of nowhere, materializing from the swirling clouds like phantoms. But these weren't just any ships. They were heavily armed with weaponry and shielded by energy fields that seemed to warp space around them. At the center of the formation loomed a massive dreadnought, its dark hull adorned with glowing runes that pulsed with ominous energy. "It's an ambush!" Logan roared. "All ships, engage!" The void erupted into chaos as the Sigma fleet clashed with the Council's forces. Energy beams and plasma bolts crisscrossed the battlefield, lighting up the darkness in blinding flashes. The Council ships moved with deadly precision, their weapons tearing into the human lines with ruthless efficiency. It was clear that these ships had been designed specifically to counter the Sigma fleet's strengths. "Focus fire on their ships," Logan ordered. "We need to break through their formation." But the Council had anticipated this. As the Sigma fleet concentrated their fire, the Council's ships adapted, shifting their formation to absorb the attacks. They were using tactics designed to lure the humans into overcommitting, exploiting their every move. On the bridge of the Council dreadnought, the Arbiter watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. Their plan was working perfectly. The Sigma fleet was strong, but strength could be turned against itself. By baiting Logan into an all-out assault, they were slowly wearing down his forces, forcing him into a position where retreat would be impossible. "Activate the disruptors," the Arbiter commanded, their voice a soft, sinister whisper. The Council ships responded instantly, unleashing waves of energy disruptors that crackled across the battlefield. The effect was immediate and devastating. The advanced shielding on the Sigma ships flickered, then collapsed as the disruptors overloaded their systems. Without their shields, the human vessels were vulnerable, their hulls tearing apart under the relentless barrage of fire. "Shields failing!" Hawkins shouted, her voice laced with panic. "We can't hold this position much longer!" Logan's mind raced as he analyzed the situation. They were being outmaneuvered, systematically pushed back toward the heart of the rift where escape would be impossible. The Council was playing a deadly game of cat and mouse, and the Sigma fleet was running out of options. "We need to break out of this trap," Logan muttered, his eyes narrowing as he searched for a weakness in the Council's formation. And then he saw it, a narrow corridor of relatively stable space, just wide enough for a concentrated push. "Redirect all power to the engines," Logan ordered. "We're making a run for it. If we can punch through their lines, we might have a shot at getting clear." The Indomitable surged forward, leading the charge as the Sigma fleet concentrated their fire on the weak point. The Council ships responded with ferocious resistance, but the human ships pressed on, their engines burning at maximum capacity. The void was filled with the roar of weapons fire and the blinding flash of exploding ships. But just as it seemed they might break through, the Arbiter made their final move. "Deploy the gravitic mines," the Arbiter ordered, a cruel smile playing across their lips. Hidden within the rift's unstable space, a network of gravitic mines activated, each one generating a localized gravity well powerful enough to tear a ship apart. The Sigma fleet flew straight into the trap, their ships caught in the deadly pull of the mines. Engines screamed as the ships fought to break free, but the gravitational forces twisted and contorted them, tearing them apart from the inside out. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Logan watched in horror as one of their cruisers was crushed like a tin can, its hull imploding under the strain. More ships followed, their frames buckling and shattering as the mines ripped them apart. "We're losing too many ships!" Hawkins cried out. "We can't take much more of this!" Logan's mind was racing. The rift was collapsing around them, the gravitic mines closing in from all sides. The Council's strategy was perfect, ruthless, and efficient. They had used the natural instability of the rift to turn the battlefield into a death trap, and unless Logan found a way out, the Sigma fleet would be annihilated. But there was one option left. A desperate gamble that could either save them or doom them all. "Prepare to overload the main reactors," Logan ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Hawkins stared at him in shock. "Overload the reactors? That could tear the ship apart?" "It's the only way," Logan said grimly. "We'll create a controlled explosion to disrupt the gravity wells and punch a hole through their formation. If it works, we might be able to break free. If it doesn't, well, we're dead anyway." There was no time to argue. The crew moved with frantic speed, rerouting power and priming the reactors for an overload. The ship shuddered as the energy levels spiked, alarms blaring as warning lights flashed across the consoles. "Ready on your command, Captain," Hawkins said, her voice tight with tension. "Now, now!" Logan roared. The reactors unleashed a massive burst of energy, sending a shockwave rippling through space. The gravity wells destabilized, their pull weakening as the disruption tore through the rift. The Indomitable powered forward, leading the remaining Sigma ships in a desperate sprint through the gap. But the Arbiter wasn't finished. They watched the humans escape with narrowed eyes, calculating their next move. With a gesture, they ordered the Council ships to reform, closing in on the fleeing fleet. The trap had failed to annihilate them, but the Arbiter wasn't ready to let them slip away so easily. "Pursue them," the Arbiter commanded. "Drive them deeper into the rift. We'll finish this hunt the way it was meant to end, with their total destruction." The chase was on. The Sigma fleet raced through the rift, dodging debris and gravitational surges as the Council ships closed in from all sides. It was a race against time and space itself, a battle to escape the jaws of death before they were crushed entirely. But even as the Council ships drew closer, Logan knew that they had one final card to play. "Prepare for emergency warp," he ordered, his voice resolute. "We're going to jump out of this hellhole before they can box us in!" The ship's warp drive spun up, the engines humming with barely contained energy. The Council ships closed in, weapons primed to deliver the killing blow. But just as they opened fire, the Sigma fleet vanished, warping out of the rift in a flash of light. The Arbiter stared at the empty space where the human ships had been, their expression cold and calculating. The trap had failed, but they knew this wasn't the end. The humans had slipped away, but they were wounded, weakened, and the Arbiter had learned something valuable. They had exposed the vulnerabilities in Logan's tactics, the limits of his resolve. This was just the beginning. The next time they crossed paths, there would be no escape. On the other side of the galaxy, the Sigma fleet re-emerged from warp, battered and bruised but alive. The cost had been high, too high. Dozens of ships were gone, thousands of lives lost, and the rift had nearly become their tomb. But they had survived, and that meant there was still a chance. In the aftermath of the battle, Logan stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The victory felt hollow, the price of survival etched into every scar on the hull. The Arbiter had shown them just how far the Council was willing to go, and Logan knew that the next encounter would be even deadlier. But he wasn't ready to give up, not yet. As long as they still had ships, as long as they still had a crew willing to fight, the war wasn't over. "We took a beating, but we're still here," Logan said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "And as long as we're still standing, we keep fighting." Hawkins stepped up beside him, her expression weary but determined. "Where do we go from here, Captain?" Logan's gaze hardened as he looked out at the endless void. "We regroup, we rebuild, and then we go after them with everything we've got. The Council's playing dirty, and it's time we hit back twice as hard." The Sigma fleet might have been bloodied, but they were far from broken. The war was entering its most dangerous phase yet, and Logan knew that the only way to win was to take the fight to the heart of the Council's power. But before that, they would need to find new allies, new resources, and a way to outmaneuver the Arbiter's cunning strategies. The galaxy was on the brink of chaos, and the next battle would decide more than just the fate of humanity. It would determine the future of all sentient life in the stars. The deep silence of space settled heavily around the Sigma fleet as they regrouped, licking their wounds after barely escaping the trap at the Oraquis Rift. The scars from that battle were etched into the hulls of their ships and the minds of their crew. Captain Logan Carter knew they had survived by the narrowest margin, but the Arbiter's game was far from over. The enemy's new strategy was designed to break them piece by piece, physically, mentally, and strategically. On the bridge of the HSS Indomitable, the tension was palpable. Engineers hustled to repair damage while the crew worked with a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation. Commander Hawkins stood beside Logan at the central holotable, the galaxy mapped out in front of them like a battlefield ready to be contested. "We're running low on resources, Captain," Hawkins reported, her tone grim. "The damage we took at the rift is worse than we initially thought. We're down several key ships, and we don't have the resources to replace them. If we don't secure new allies and supplies soon, we're in serious trouble." Logan's gaze didn't waver from the star map. "I know. That's why we need to move quickly. The longer we stay on the defensive, the more time the Council has to tighten the noose. We need to hit them where it hurts, and we need to bring in more firepower to do it." But even as he spoke, Logan knew the real challenge wasn't just finding new allies. It was holding the fragile alliance they already had together. The Varen, a warrior race driven by honor and bloodlust, were growing increasingly restless. They had joined the Sigma fleet for battle, and the cautious, strategic approach Logan insisted on was wearing thin on them. "The Varen warlord Garros is demanding another meeting," Hawkins added, her voice edged with concern. "He's not happy with how things are going. They want to fight, and they want it now. If we don't give them that, we risk losing their support entirely." Logan clenched his jaw. "Garros is a blunt instrument, but we need that instrument if we're going to keep the Council off balance. If they start to fracture, it'll be a disaster." "Set up the meeting, I'll handle it." In the heart of the Varen flagship, a massive warship adorned with ancient sigils and scars from 1,000 battles, Logan confronted Warlord Garros. In a chamber thick with anticipation, Logan faced Warlord Garros. The room was barely illuminated by flickering torches, whose shadows danced across the armored forms of the Varan commanders. Garros stood prominently in the center, his eyes reflecting a controlled fury. His voice, a low, rumbling growl, addressed Logan. "We've endured enough waiting, human." Garros snarled. "Your fleet remains hidden in the darkness, while our enemies consolidate their forces. This is not the warrior's way. We are meant to engage, not cower in the shadows like the faint of heart. If you will not offer us battle, then we shall find it ourselves." Logan held Garros's fiery gaze steady, unflinching. He understood the Varan's value of raw power above all else, where any hint of weakness could shatter the fragile alliance. However, this went beyond clashing strategies. It was a battle of cultures. Logan needed to proceed cautiously. "I grasp your frustration, Warlord," Logan replied, his voice firm. "And you're right. We can't remain idle while the Council strengthens itself. However, charging into battle without a plan would be playing directly into their hands. They are anticipating a rash action from us, and that's precisely what they desire." Garros's eyes narrowed. "You believe we fear their tricks and traps? Let them come. We will crush them with our might." Logan took a step closer, his voice shifting to a steely tone. "Strength without strategy is mere chaos. Yet, I'm not requesting more waiting. We have a target, a Council stronghold within the Talion Belt. It is heavily defended but holds crucial resources and intel, elements that could alter the war's trajectory. Seize it, and you'll be granted the fight you crave. We both achieve our objectives." For an extended pause, Garros stared at Logan, measuring his words. The tension within the room was stifling as the Varan warlord considered the proposal. Eventually, a slow, predatory smile stretched across Garros's scarred face. "You speak of combat, human. That is a language we comprehend. If there is blood to be spilled and glory to be earned, then we will follow you for now. But should you fail to deliver, then we will locate our own battles to engage in." Logan inclined his head in acknowledgement. The alliance endured, yet he knew the balance was precarious. The Varan were a double-edged sword, capable of deciding the fate of a battle, but just as likely to dismantle everything if their desire for battle remained unfulfilled. What Logan did not comprehend was that the Arbiter was many steps ahead, concealed inside the Council's fortified stronghold. The enigmatic leader observed the unfolding events with cold precision. The humans were walking directly into their next trap, one expertly crafted to exploit their desperation and their strained alliance. In a dimly lit war room, surrounded by holographic projections of the battlefield, the Arbiter outlined their plan to the Council's high-ranking commanders. "The Sigma fleet is advancing to secure the Talion Belt," the Arbiter stated, their voice a chilling whisper. "We will let them believe they hold the advantage. The Varan are eager for war, thus we shall grant them one. We'll draw them in, convince them of victory, then utterly devastate them with overwhelming force. Yet that's only the initial phase." The hologram transitioned, displaying key human installations, supply depots, communication hubs, and civilian colonies. "We strike at their vulnerabilities. Sabotage, disinformation, and fear will succeed where brute force fails. The humans depend on hope and unity. We will tear that apart, bit by bit. Once they lose faith in their leaders, once their morale crumbles, the war will be ours." The Council commanders nodded in grim agreement. The Arbiter's plan was aimed at crippling the enemy spirit just as much as destroying their ships. The Sigma fleet would be weakened from within, and, when they realized, I realized the necessity of correcting the errors myself, so I've gone through and separated the words that were stuck together, fixed typos, and made the text readable while keeping the structure and content intact. Here's the cleaned-up version. The Talion Belt was a remote area of space, filled with asteroid fields and volatile star systems, where Council control was weak and independent factions held dominion. It was the perfect location for the Sigma fleet to strike, to secure desperately needed resources. But it was equally perfect for an ambush. The Sigma fleet emerged from warp, their ships forming up as they entered the belt's turbulent terrain. I'm picking up a very concerning absence of defense. Logan's eyes narrowed as he assessed the tactical readouts. Everything seems tranquil. Where are their defensive forces, Hawkins? Hawkins, echoing the unease rippling through everyone, questioned. This area should be overflowing with council ships, yet I'm hardly registering any activity. Logan shared her concern but could not afford to hesitate. The Varen were prepared for battle and would not remain patient for long. Remain vigilant. This could be a setup, but we cannot retreat now. We secure the area and then confront whatever they hurl at us. The fleet moved cautiously, weapons primed. Varen warships surged forward, eager to engage. At first, the Council's forces seemed thinly spread, an easy target for the combined strength of the Sigma fleet and their allies. Yet, as they went further into the belt, Logan's instinct screamed something was amiss. Then it happened. "Multiple incoming contacts!" Hawkins shouted. "Council reinforcements arriving quickly from the rear!" Logan's blood ran cold. They'd been lured in exactly as the Arbiter had envisioned. The enemy forces were closing from all sides, eliminating their means of escape and boxing them in a deadly crossfire. The Council's plan was to encircle and annihilate them with a swift, decisive strike. "It's a trap!" Logan roared. "All ships, break formation and prepare for evasive maneuvers. We must break through their lines and regroup." However, the Varen weren't listening, lost in the exhilaration of combat. Garros and his warriors charged headlong into the fight, unmindful of the danger, tearing into the Council ships with savage ferocity. But it was precisely what the Arbiter desired. The more the Varen committed, the deeper they would be pulled into the killing zone. "Garros, pull back!" Logan barked over the comms. "You're being surrounded!" Garros's response was a snarling act of defiance. "We are warriors, not cowards! We do not retreat. We fight until the very last breath." Logan clenched his teeth. The situation was spiraling out of control. If they did not discover a method to extract themselves, this would turn into a massacre. However, he couldn't simply abandon the Varen. Without them, the Sigma fleet would be significantly weakened. Logan made a quick decision. "Redirect power to engines and shields. We're breaking out. All ships, follow my lead." The Indomitables surged forward, leading the charge as the Sigma fleet slammed into the Council's encircling forces. The void erupted into chaos. Energy beams crisscrossed, and explosions tore through space as ships were ripped apart. Logan's gambit was straightforward. Punch a hole through the enemy lines and create an escape route before they were entirely overwhelmed. The battle was brutal and unrelenting. The Council's ships, enhanced by their superior positioning, hammered the Sigma fleet from all sides. But Logan's maneuver just barely succeeded. They managed to break through, extracting the Varen from the trap. Still, the cost was significant. Several ships were lost in the effort, and the retreat left them battered and bleeding. As they finally moved clear of the battlefield, Logan's comms lit up with an incoming transmission from Garros. The Varen warlord's voice was laced with barely suppressed rage. "You pulled us from a fight, human!" Garros spat. "You believe us weak, in need of your protection. If you ever question our honor again, this alliance is over." Logan forced himself to remain calm. "This isn't about honor, Garros. It's about survival. We were outnumbered and outflanked. You were walking into a slaughter. We have to regroup and attack on our terms, not theirs." For an uncertain moment it appeared Garros might depart, but finally the warlord growled in grudging acceptance. "Very well. However, remember this. Next time, we will battle as warriors, or not at all." The transmission cut off, leaving Logan to gaze grimly at the tactical display. The Council had nearly sprung the perfect trap. They had shown their hand, a strategy of patience, manipulation, and relentless pressure. The Sigma fleet had survived but were shaken. "We are playing into the Arbiter's hands," Hawkins said quietly. "They are pushing us to the edge, and if we slip up even once—" "I know," Logan responded. "Yet we are not defeated. We need to rethink our strategy. Discover a way to counter their moves. This war is not just about firepower anymore. It's about who can outthink the other." However, as he uttered the words, Logan could not shake the feeling that the Arbiter was already anticipating his next move. The enemy was patient, calculating, and always one step ahead. If they didn't adapt, if they didn't find a way to disrupt this pattern, the war would end not with a decisive battle, but with a slow, inevitable collapse. The galaxy was teetering on the brink of chaos, and the Sigma fleet was running out of time to change the war's course. The aftermath of the Talion Belt engagement left deep wounds within the Sigma fleet. They had narrowly escaped the Arbiter's trap, but the price had been excessively high. With resources dwindling, ships barely holding together, and tensions within the Alliance reaching a boiling point, Captain Logan Carter knew they were dangerously close to breaking. The Indomitable drifted in the shadow of a dead star, surrounded by the remnants of their once formidable fleet. Within the command center, the atmosphere was grim. Logan stood at the holotable, reviewing the battle reports. His expression hardened. Every flashing red icon on the display represented a lost ship, a shattered crew, and a war that was slipping away from their grasp. "We cannot continue taking hits like this, Captain," Commander Hawkins said, her voice strained. "We've lost nearly a third of our combat strength. Morale is plummeting. Supplies are decreasing, and we've got whole sectors going dark due to the Arbiter's sabotage efforts. We're fighting a war on too many fronts." Logan rubbed his temples, the weight of command pressing down like a vice.